We heard the Brees Hall trade rumors. Now Kyle Pitts to the New York Jets, an idea that was floated around by ESPN's Bill Barnwell. Would it make sense for the Jets to try and orchestrate a deal for the former Mackey Award winner? We'll talk about that and much more, all coming up here on a Friday edition of NY Flight Jets Talk, joined by our guy Michael Nania from JetsXFactor.com.
Jets, Jets, let's go.
Jets wide receiver Wesley Walker. Wesley, how you doing today? ESPN writer Mr. Rich Cimini, Jets reporter for The Athletic, Mr. Zach Rosenblatt, Hall of Famer and Jets legend Mr. Marty Lyons.
Your host, Connor Law.
What is going on, everyone? Hello and welcome back here to another edition of NY Flight Jets Talk, coming to you here on this Friday, April 4th, 2025. Can't thank you guys all enough for tuning in here on the show. Make sure you smash that like button and hit subscribe. It's completely free and it helps us grow significantly here on the program. That's the free way to contribute to the show. The paid way helps us just as much. You can get into our membership raffle. Every membership gifted or every $2.99 super chat will get you an entry into our raffle. Prize we're giving away this month include a Don Maynard signed photo, Joe Klecko signed helmet, Joe Willie Namath replica Super Bowl III ring, CJ Mosley signed jersey, a free item from our merch store, and a channel emoji. So make sure to get in on that if you haven't already. Appreciate all your support. Throw all your questions in the chat. You can call into the show with the pinned comment, like, share, and subscribe. Appreciate all your support on the show. But joining me right now here on this Friday evening, one of the best when it comes to covering the New York Jets, podcasting, writing, he does it all, folks. Michael Nania of Jets X Factor, gracing us with his presence here on the show. Michael, means the world. I appreciate you sparing some time for us here on this Friday evening.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And since I've been on last, I noticed you got a hat, with your logo, the intro music that you're playing, the beat you had at the beginning. Like, I was about to put a verse down on that.
I saw you back.
Continue into the podcast.
For sure. I saw you. I saw you backstage. For sure, 1,000%. We appreciate you hopping on as always. And last time we had you on, there was no Aaron Glenn news. We were talking about the Jets. I remember we were talking about the Jets potentially interviewing Frank Reich. That just goes to show how long ago that was. But super happy we were able to get you back on. And I guess before we get into the Jets, you mentioned the beat. So I'll start with a fun one. I know you're a big J. Cole fan. Favorite J. Cole album, Michael?
It's always hard because I don't even feel like there's a weak one, but the one that got me into him was 2014 Forest Hills Drive. Yeah. So I have to go with that, but that's hardly to say that it's, head and shoulders above anything else. I'm a pretty big fan of his entire catalog. So, but I would go with 2014.
Yeah, it's tough for me. It's between 2014 and I also like the offseason too. One of my two favorite songs from J. Cole come on both those albums, No Role Models and My Life. So two of my favorite songs come on both those albums. I probably have to agree with you though. I think I'm going to roll with 2014 Forest Hills Drive. But people are here for some of the Jets talk, Michael, and that's what we're going to get into. Wrote an article earlier today for Jets X Factor, the news story of Bill Barnwell suggesting potential trade idea, Kyle Pitts to the Jets. And then I put my own opinion out in an article where I pretty much said, hey, at the right price, it could be a low risk, high reward type move. But let's keep in mind, Kyle Pitts is someone who's known for his pass catching ability. He's known for his crazy athleticism. On the flip side, though, the Jets need blocking tight ends. You wrote a whole article about that. Kyle Pitts does not offer that, hasn't lived up to his hype. So when I say a low risk, high reward type move, I floated around a conditional fifth round pick that could turn into a fourth. I think I said if he eclipses over 650 receiving yards his first season, that is what I'd be willing to give up for Pitts. Michael, how do you feel about that potential trade idea, and what would you be willing to give up for Kyle Pitts?
Yeah, it's a fascinating idea. And I think, this is something that kind of came to mind a couple days ago. Joe Blewett was putting out some Josh Reynolds clips, a signing that I was hoping the Jets would make, and they did. I think it's going to be a really good pickup. But as I was thinking about it, I started to realize that the Jets are still a couple of pieces away from a guy like Reynolds really being in the role that he needs to be in as like the, I would say fourth pass catcher on the team in terms of targets. I think if he's in that type of role, then you're in a good spot as a team. He's going to, be a valuable player in that role. But they at this, if they play a game today, is Josh Reynolds your number 2 target?
Exactly.
That could definitely be, unless you're gonna like use Brees Hall like he's Marshall Falk or LT. Like it's probably gonna be Josh Reynolds as your number 2
Yeah.
pass catcher, and that's not ideal. So that brings me, to the idea of trading for a guy like Pitts, because if you don't get Tyler Warren or even say Colston Loveland at the top of this draft, or second round, third round, you attack receiver or tight end. If the Jets can't make that move, which, we think they will prioritize those positions, but you never know how the draft plays out. If they don't, they're in a very precarious position offensively. And, we know they're not competing for a Super Bowl, but if you want to develop Justin Fields, give him the best chance to reach his ceiling, you got to have a competent group of pass catchers in there, and they're still a couple pieces away from that. So if they can't get one of those top tight ends at the top of the draft, or take a McMillan, like do you look to the trade market to maybe get someone who's capable
Yeah.
of being a number 2 target and getting 80 to 100 targets in the season? And a guy like Pitts, could do that. And I think if he does get traded, he's going into his contract year on that 5th-year option. If he does get dealt, if he's on the trade market and you could get him for, like you said, a conditional day 3 pick, I think he's interesting because the talent is clearly there. And he's been underwhelming, but it's also been, Arthur Smith was a questionable
Yeah.
coach during his time there with his usage of the weapons. And then this past season, they had Kirk Cousins coming off an injury who struggled, then a rookie quarterback after him. So there are some, excuses, but he has been legitimately disappointing in some areas, like route running. Blocking has been very poor. So that's why you would buy low, and it's on a contract year. So it's not a ton of commitment, but there's a lot of talent there. And he is a type of guy who, bringing it back to how I started this, the fact that the Jets need that, just someone who could come in after Garrett Wilson and be your number 2 target and allow guys like Josh Reynolds, Xavier
Mhm.
Gibson, Corley, allow those guys to just be supporting players. You do have to get another guy in there who could really attract a lot of targets and handle that role. And Pitts is capable of doing that as a pass catcher. He is a solid pass catcher. The expectations on him create, a negative kind of narrative around him, but for what he is, he can fill that role for the Jets, I think. So, yeah, that type of trade is an interesting possibility if the Jets can't get that elite pass catcher with their top 10 pick in this draft.
1000%. And the reason I listed a conditional 5th-round pick there, fifth-round pick that could turn into a 4th if he eclipsed 650 receiving yards next season. The reason I put that is, and I mentioned it in the article too, is you look in rounds 1 through 3, I think you can get tight ends who,
Yeah.
who are better than Kyle Pitts, whether that be, Tyler Warren in the 1st round, Colston Loveland, that debate we'll get into in a little bit. Even Harold Fannin Jr. from Bowling Green, who's pretty much your big wide receiver build at 6'3", 230 pounds. He's going to force missed tackles for you. He's going to be your big receiver. He's a sharp route runner. And then he also has that somewhat upside as a blocker. The problem is, I don't care how great your technique is. If you're 6'3", 230 pounds, you're already going to be at a disadvantage blocking as a tight end at the NFL level. So even a Terrence Ferguson from Oregon, who might be a late round 3, early round 4 guy, is someone I'd be intrigued in. Thing is, when you start getting in the 5th round, that's when you start just throwing darts at the board. And Kyle Pitts wasn't a 1st-round pick for no reason. This is someone who won the Mackey Award, highly athletic, the highest drafted tight end in NFL history, and then the most receiving yards by a tight end during his rookie season since Mike Ditka in 1961. So this, Kyle Pitts has shown he has the talent to have success at the NFL level. Just when is he going to show that? And, maybe he comes in and he's the missing piece for this Jets tight end room, because I can tell you right now, no matter what they trade for him, if he joined this team today, he would be the tight end 1 all day over Jeremy Ruckert, Stone Smart, Zach Kuntz, Neil Johnson, who if you told me he was a fake player, I would probably believe you. There are just so many. This tight end room just needs so much help overall. So whether that you add a Kyle Pitts on the trade block, or a Dallas Goedert is even another guy I would like, I'd be open for any of those options. 1000%. Michael, Brees Hall trade rumors. This is someone who is a fan favorite. So if the Jets, no matter what, even if they got a 2nd-round pick in return, which I'm letting you know right now, the Jets are not getting a 2nd-round pick for Brees Hall under any circumstance, fans would still be a little upset just because of how beloved he is in the fan base. Would you be open to trading Brees Hall at the right price, Nadia?
I do think it's something that should be on the table. And, I say that as someone who held Brees in a very high regard going into this season. I think when I made my ranking of every player in the roster going into last year. I'm pretty sure I had him number one in terms of how I thought the season was going to play out. Because the rookie year was special. We all know that during his brief stint. And then even the year he came back, like, started slow with the workload and everything. But at the end of the day, the production he put together in that situation was absurd. I really think he exceeded expectations better than almost any running back that year. But then you bring it to this past season, and it was pretty underwhelming because the support was a lot better than that previous year. The O line was more talented. Aaron Rodgers was healthy, lightening up the box. At the very least, he did that, even if he may have struggled. But yeah, it was a better supporting cast. He was another year removed from the injury. But his efficiency went down and his impact went down. There just weren't many games where it felt like Brees Hall was dominant in ways where he was during his first two seasons. So, yeah, it was a big down year, but still only 23 going on 24. Not a guy you want to give up on necessarily, but if you can get a decent return for someone who's going into a contract year as a second round pick, with running back being a position where players usually peak early, you want to get out in front of that more so than commit to them long term. Then yeah, I think every player has a price, and I don't think he's untouchable. And I know in your mock draft, you had a scenario where the Jets could trade Brees for a third round pick, and then have that be the precursor to selecting Ashton Genty in the first round, which is another whole topic you can get into.
Oh, yeah.
But I think if trading Brees is part of that and selecting prior to selecting Genty, and I think it makes it a lot more tenable because you're not really over investing in running back as much, since you could turn Brees into another pick. But yeah, I do think after the down year that Brees had, it's worth considering for the right price. I'm not rushing to push him out the door because he's still so young and has shown such a high ceiling that I'd like to see him, get another crack at tapping into that. But it was a down enough year to where I'm not clinging on to him if the right price comes up.
1000%. So what I did, I got a third round pick, number 85 overall from the Denver Broncos in exchange for Hall. And you can go out check the article out, jetsxfactor.com. But I pretty much said, you can just connect the dots. The Broncos having a hole now at running back after losing Javonte Williams, Muji, the connection to Denver, Aaron Glenn and Sean Payton obviously have that relationship. And then we're going to get into Ashton Genty right now. I had the Jets selecting Genty with the 7th overall pick after trading Hall. This is a topic that a lot of fans, specifically Jet fans, just dismiss right away, thinking running back in the first round, what are we talking about here? Running back, you have all these different running backs on the team. Don't select Ashton Genty. Well, you just got rid of one in Brees Hall in this trade scenario. And Ashton Genty is as close to a generational running back that we've seen in a long time. Probably the best running back. Obviously, you've been doing this a lot longer than I have, Nani. You think it's fair to say that he's the most talented running back that has been scouted since probably Saquon in 2018?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a really strong conversation for it, and I'm working on an article right now that I should have up maybe tomorrow, next few days. But you just even compare it to a Saquon and some of these other generational running backs, or who got that label when they came out. What does that word really mean? I don't know, but compared to other guys in that tier, like some of the numbers, he forced over 150 missed tackles last year. He had almost 2,000 yards after contact. Like, these are broken numbers that even if you put up in a video game would be considered, on a different level. It's and that's what running back is all about. It's, to me, can you force missed tackles? Can you get yards after contact? What do you bring beyond what the offense schemes up for you? And you look at his numbers and you watch the film to back it up, and you just see how many yards he creates off sheer playmaking ability. And he is as special as any running back we've seen. And it's particularly important in this class because it's not a class that's loaded with can't miss prospects. Outside of Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, although even those guys have their own questions, it's, is there anyone else who's a legit blue chip can't miss guy? It doesn't really feel like it. You compare that to, like, say, the 2022 draft. I feel like Garrett Wilson went 10th to the Jets. Where does he go in this draft? Probably top 5. I mean, it's just not as top heavy as I think a lot of draft classes that you usually see. So considering that, and you have a guy like Genty, who's among running backs, really, really high tier, it could, I think, prompt a team like the Jets to say, hey, he is the best player. That's the guy we're going to take. The Raiders are one spot ahead of them, of the Jets. They could do that as well. But if they don't, and he's there for the Jets, I mean, I don't think I'd be the hugest, I wouldn't be a fan like parading for it, but I could understand the logic because of that scenario of him potentially just being by far the highest graded player for them.
100%, and that's pretty much what I wrote in my article. And one thing I will add, when it comes to watching Ashton Genty film, he averaged 7 yards per carry last season for Boise State, on top of the missed tackles force and the yards after contact. That's unheard of. Watching his film and seeing his misses, like when he's trying to hit the home run play and he doesn't get it, like his misses are still 4 or 5 yard gains, which is just crazy to fathom when you look at a running back prospect nowadays. And it's kind of what I broke down in the article, Michael, is they're not in this win now window with Aaron Rodgers anymore. They have time to kind of sit back, retool, look at the best player on the board. And I mentioned building sustained success, something that Aaron Glenn spoke a lot about. And his team isn't built to compete for the Lombardi trophy. So you might as well take the player rather, who you think is the best player available, is going to come in and contribute to your team right away. And I think Genty could do just that. A lot of people point to the Penei Sewell pick in Detroit and say, oh, well, look what Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell did when they first got to Detroit. They solidified the trenches. People forget in 2023, despite having David Montgomery under contract, the Lions drafted Jahmyr Gibbs in the top 15, and fans went crazy over it. However, if Detroit could go back and do it, they would not think twice about selecting Gibbs, and that paid off in a really, really solid manner in Detroit. So again, I'm just saying, don't count out Genty. Like you said, Nania, he's not my number one option for this team, but I certainly wouldn't hate it by any means. Appreciate you tuning in. Smash the like button, hit subscribe. Appreciate you tuning in here on NY Flight Jets Talk. Got any questions for Nania and I? Throw them in the chat. We will get to those. Pin comment at the top of the chat if you want to call in. Before we get any further, got to take care of some house cleaning here. Our guy Jimmy Jets wants in on our membership raffle. 20 gifted memberships from our guy Jimmy. Jimmy, can't thank you enough for all your support here on the program. You're the best, and that is 20 raffle entries for you, Jimmy.
That's what I do know. We're the freaking New York Jets, so we're built for this shit.
Damn straight, AG. Appreciate all your support as always, Jimmy. Like I said, 20 raffle entries. You're the best. Can't thank you enough for all your support. And then Luppy follows that up with 5 gifted memberships. Luppy, that's 5 raffle entries for you. Appreciate your support as always. And then Luppy comes in with his 2-month member super chat. Says, if we draft a quarterback, who do you think we will draft? Well, for Jets X Factor, I released the top 3 developmental quarterbacks. I had Jalen Milroe at 3, Kyle McCord at 2, Will Howard at 1. But Michael, if the Jets do draft a quarterback, who do you think that will be?
I do wonder if the Jackson Dart hype has some legitimacy to it, just because we're coming off, the NFL is a copycat league. We see things happen and teams try to follow the trend. Usually it fails and then the trend dies. But right now, the trend that started last year was the Broncos and the Falcons needed developmental long-term quarterbacks, and they were sitting in a spot where, it didn't make sense based on the board, but they just went ahead and reached 20 plus spots based on, where these quarterbacks were supposed to go. And they just got their guy anyway. And I think, TBD with both of them, but I think they both feel pretty good about that. Bo Nix really developed. Michael Penix showed good promise towards the end of the year. So I think coming off of that, I still wonder if the Jets are, going to be sold enough on their quarterback situation to just punt it to next year, especially because they seem like they want to compete. I don't know if they expect to be this high in the draft again, although I would say they probably will be, but I don't know if they think they will. So I don't know. I'm not totally sold yet that if a quarterback pick happens, it won't just be the Jets going and getting Jackson Dart up at 7. I'm personally not a fan of doing that. I'm just trying to read the room and see what might happen. And I do wonder if that's still on the table. But I mean, if that's not the case and they do like day 2, either pick, second or third round, where are you leaning in terms of who you think that the Jets will prefer among those non-first round guys.
Who the Jets? Okay, so versus if you saw the article I wrote, who I want
Yeah.
is Will Howard, 1000%. Like someone who's insanely accurate, can make NFL throws in and outside the pocket. That prototypical build for a quarterback, a ton of experience. Who I think they will go, when I wrote this in the article, I think it's going to be Kyle McCord, because Kyle McCord, his style of play, his build, the way he throws the ball, his pocket presence, his just everything about him reminds me a lot of Jared Goff. And obviously, this whole a lot of this coaching staff coming from Detroit, Tanner Engstrand, Aaron Glenn, the offensive line coach, Steve Hyden. A lot of Detroit coaches on this staff, I could really see them leaning Kyle McCord out of Syracuse. Also grew up a Jet fan, wore number 6 because of Mark Sanchez. Just those little things there that I can really see the Jets settling on when it comes to McCord.
Yeah, and since you bring that up, that presents an interesting conversation regarding the scheme because, yeah, I agree with you. Like, I see a lot of those traits with McCord. Like, I think it could fit if you're trying to do what the Lions were doing with Engstrand, but with Justin Fields at quarterback, that's an entirely different dynamic in terms of how you're building the offense. And
It's
at
true.
JetX, Andrew Fialco, he did an amazing article that everyone should check out. He broke down 10 specific plays. He had the diagrams, he had the film clips and everything, and the progressions that Engstrand should implement for Justin Fields in this offense to maximize it for his strengths. And if, Engstrand's going to follow that model and implement some of these plays, you're talking a lot of QB draws, a lot of RPO plays, a lot of simplified 1-2 reads that put him, outside the pocket and allow him to go to a scramble if a couple throws aren't there. This is totally different type of offense than what the Lions were running. So since they committed to Fields, he's not the franchise quarterback or anything yet, but they gave him $30 million guaranteed. It's not nothing. They want him to start this year and see what he's got. So they do have a level of commitment to him to where they should tailor the offense to him if they want to make this investment worthwhile. But at the same time, that type of offense isn't going to work for the majority of other quarterbacks who don't have the same physical tools that he does. So I'm curious to see how they balance building around Fields versus Engstrand's Lions background versus potential other quarterbacks they bring in. That will be a very interesting balancing act for the coaching staff.
That's a really solid point you mentioned there, because as soon as I hear that, I think of the Baltimore Ravens situation a couple of years ago where you had Lamar Jackson, obviously, as your starter, and then Tyler Huntley sitting behind him, that similar skill set. In that sense, maybe you go with a Jalen Milroe type guy. My thing with Milroe is he's so raw, Michael. Like Jalen Milroe is just such especially when he's as a passer. So Milroe does concern me a little bit. Reminds me a lot of Anthony Richardson. He's just a pure athlete in my eyes. So you're going to need to take, and you're going to need to teach him how to play the quarterback position at the next level, which could pretty much require one full year of sitting on the bench. So I view him more as a project. But right now, my pick is Will Howard if they were to lean a developmental option. Matthew Smith comes in, says Tyler Warren should not be an option, Matthew Golden or Armand Membu. And that's it, Michael.
Yeah, I mean, tight end at 7 is definitely positional value-wise in a similar area as running back, I would say, in terms of how much of a – I think the bar is higher if you're taking a guy like that because contract-wise – those positions are so much cheaper that taking a tight end at 7 makes him a much higher paid player relative to the position than if you took a tackle or a receiver. So what I think it does is it raises the bar. Like if you take a tight end at 7, it's not good enough for him to be a starter or a good starter. Like we talked about Kyle Pitts earlier. Like that's a major failed pick to have a guy like him. He's not terrible, but for the 4th overall pick on a tight end, I think when that pick happened, he was immediately a top 5 or 10 paid tight end in the league. And that wouldn't be quite the case at number 7. But yeah, it just, if you're going to take non-premium position that high, it has to be a really good player. So if the Jets believe Tyler Warren, or I think Colston Loveland needs to be in that conversation too, one of these guys can be that good at the position. And considering the need that the Jets have there, I wouldn't rule it out or be against it. But I do think it's fair to be skeptical of the idea of that when you could go with a more premium position where they also have a hole at right tackle.
Luppy comes back in, says, Brees, you need a second this year and a third next year. Michael, I don't think you're getting anything close to that with Brees Hall. Are you with me there?
Yeah, I mean he was a second round pick.
Yeah,
He would have to add. I mean, how good would he have to be to add a
because he
on top
hasn't
of
lived
just
up
getting
to
back
the hype.
on top of just getting the value back for him, he would have to be so good to where you would get a third round on top of that, and he's going into a contract year. I don't see that. I think best case scenario is like in your article, if there's a desperate, Denver's a really good pick by you as a potential landing spot because they're weak at running back right now. I think Jaleel McLaughlin is their top guy. This is a team that's on the verge. They won 10 games last year. They got a second-year quarterback leap hopefully coming. This is a team that definitely thinks it could jump into the mix this year and compete. So that puts them in a good position to say, let's supplement this with the running back. There's the Muji connection, so that is a good choice by you. The only thing that comes to mind is there are bad vibes with Brees in Denver, and so that would suck for him. But other than that, I could see it
for sure. Michael, I know we planned for 30 minutes. You got a couple minutes left. How are we doing on time here?
Yeah, no, I'm good.
All right, perfect. Appreciate it. We'll keep it going with a few more questions. Jimmy says, anyone who thinks Graham can't stop the run is blind and needs to go watch film again. Michael, I know us and the rest of the JetX writers, we go back and forth talking draft all the time in our group chat there. And one of the biggest things with Graham that a lot of us have spoken about is it's nothing against him particularly as a player. It's, do you want to use the 7th overall pick on someone to plug next to Quinnen Williams, who weighed in at under 300 pounds? I just don't know if it's worthwhile there.
Yeah, and I think he could stop the run. I mean, the production was insane. Yeah, the film is great. There are plenty of plays on there. I just think, like you said, from a Jets perspective, Quinnen has played his whole career, or at least the Saleh era, with a lot of these gap shooting lighter guys next to him, like your Quentin Jeffersons, Javon Kinlaws, guys who can't really hold their ground and don't attract double teams, and it's putting a lot more pressure on Quinnen Williams. And Quinnen's a 3 tech for the most part. He can go inside because he's that good. He could play any role. But if you want him to be the most impactful as a pass rusher, you want him to be out at 3 tech, and you want a guy next to him who could shade inside and be an anchor point against the run. And Mason Graham's a good run defender, but it's kind of in the same way as Quinnen is, like more so from that. You're in the same alignment that, we said we would like Quinnen to play, more out over the guard than put him over the center, and he's going to plug up the A gaps for you. So it's not that he's incapable of doing that. I think he is, but it's just, looking at the frame that he came in with and his strengths and weaknesses, I don't think that's where he primarily thrives. And so I think it's just a question of whether that's the best fit next to Quinnen Williams.
Now, an article you released a few days ago, Michael, you listed 4 players who could be a fit for the Jets pretty much in the early rounds. Nick Scroton and Shamar Stewart, 2 of the names that come to my mind, two names that come to mind for me right away. And, both those guys, they met with both of them, actually, according to Tony Pauline at the Texas A&M Pro Day. 2 names to look out for. I want to get your thoughts on Stewart, particularly, because this is someone who had 4.5 sacks during his entire college career, but all the traits in the world, the perfect 10.0 RAS score, almost in a perfect combine. So drafting Stewart, you're gambling on traits there. Nania, Stewart at 7. Does that make sense for you?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen picks like this a lot in recent years. I mean, you think of Trayvon Walker being the number 1 pick over Aiden Hutchinson, which obviously that wasn't a good decision, but Trayvon Walker's a solid player. So we've seen teams.
Overall pick. He's like a 4th round, 4th
similar
guy,
to like Kyle Pitts, like not what you spent the resources for. But yeah, like we've seen teams bite on that. And I think the thing with Stewart and the idea of taking this projection based prospect with the high pick, I feel like it kind of aligns with some of the things we've seen from the Jets so far. It's a lot of in terms of free agency, a lot of traits based guys. Maybe they don't have the production yet. Maybe they've shown it in small spurts, but the Jets are showing, and especially with the quarterback, choice of Justin Fields. They're showing a lot of confidence in the coaching staff to take multiple players who have tools and bet that the coaching staff can get the most out of them. So we'll see how Muji, what he shows in this draft in terms of his philosophies and how that, develops over the years of multiple drafts. But I feel like there are signs that maybe the Jets will be this bet on ceiling type of drafting team. But we'll see. I'm interested to see what we can glean from one draft class in that regard. Like, what type of drafting team is this? Do they like high floor guys who are productive, team captains? Do they like pure athleticism and upside? Stewart would fall into that. They still need a lot of defensive line depth, even though they have a couple of good young edge rushers, but both of them have questions of their own. I think Stewart, and why I mentioned him in this article, is he gives you a little tweener potential. He could play inside, he could play outside, which is something that Aaron Glenn valued. It's something they missed with JFM last year. So I think it's a possibility. Is it my favorite option? No, I think there are guys who have similar, like a Membu. I think he has similar ceiling at tackle, but a little bit more production for you to bank on versus a Stewart who, struggled to make big plays in college. So it wouldn't be my favorite pick, but I think there are reasons to believe it's on the table.
For sure. Where are we here in the chat? We'll go over to Jimmy, who says, would you trade down if possible, maybe get to the 20s and get Grant instead of Graham? I mean, Kenneth Grant is huge. I think he's 337 pounds in a 6'2", 6'3" frame, something of that nature. I think that was his pre-combine measurements. He's huge, but he doesn't provide much value as a pass rusher. He's just like a big guy you put in the middle to clog up the middle of the line and stop the run. Like, would you be open to that though? Let's say maybe you trade with Pittsburgh. I know you released the news article earlier today about Pittsburgh visiting with Dart and the potential of them maybe trying to come up and get Dart. Maybe you trade back with Pittsburgh. You're sitting at pick 21, I think is what they have. Would you be open to maybe taking a Kenneth Grant if he's still on the board, or you still want to look elsewhere?
Yeah, it's an interesting possibility. I know Stefan at JetX put out an article too, like looking at that idea of trading down to 21, I believe the Steelers are at. And yeah, I mean, you could. The thing about that trade with Pittsburgh specifically is they don't have a second round pick. So if that were to happen, it would definitely be a future first that you're getting, more so than this draft. But like on that topic we just talked about with Mason Graham, I think Grant is someone who would definitely fit what we said we're looking for next to Quinnen Williams. It's just more a question of, do you want to spend your first round pick on, after trading down, and you wouldn't be recouping anything in this draft from the Steelers, at least a high pick. Do you want to use that first round pick on a run stopping defensive tackle who probably doesn't have a lot of pass rushing upside? So that's the question. I think the fit is great. That's a huge need. The Jets still need that run stuffing ability. It's just the value of, do you want to do that? But if you think he could be elite, then I think it's worth it. There are some examples of these types of tackles that go later in the first round, maybe not super high. So I think if they evaluate him and they love his run defense, it's something you could justify.
Let's see. Brian comes in and says, can we all agree that Travis dropping a 7 is our collective best case scenario? I put an article out about this yesterday, Michael. Maurice Jones, Drew Jones, of NFL.com had Hunter falling to the Jets and the Jets taking him in his latest mock draft for NFL.com. After looking at it, there's a possibility. I think the biggest wild card, though, is what do the Browns do? Like, if they ultimately end up taking Shedeur Sanders, I think there's a chance he's available when the Jets pick. If I had to put odds on it, I don't think it's going to happen. But let's say in the rare case scenario, Michael, it does happen. Do you take him and you take him and then you whatever the Jets' plan is for him, whether it's they view him as a DB, whether they view him as a wide receiver, do you take him or do you try to trade back and just get a haul?
Yeah, it's a very interesting dilemma. I lean towards taking him because, like we talked about earlier, just not a lot of blue chips in here. I think your only candidates are Hunter, Carter, and Genty probably. And if the Jets are lucky enough to get one of those at 7, I feel like that's a gift you just have to take advantage of. So I would probably take him, but the demand would definitely be quite immense at that point. But on the topic of trade downs, I think maybe the more realistic thing that could transpire is Sanders falling there. There's some buzz growing that, I know Schefter reported yesterday that it's starting to feel like neither Cleveland or the Giants will take him, at which point you're not seeing a team that could possibly take him until maybe the Raiders. You could still consider it, but it's not a desperate need. And then you have the Jets after that. So that would be an interesting decision. Did the Jets take him, or do they just field trade calls at that point? But I would say that's the most realistic trade down opportunity.
Two more here. Brian says, if we drop to 20, I'm all in on Nick Amanwari. SP ? Strong safety. Here's the thing, Michael. I was doing some research on Amanwari yesterday. He's pretty much like a do-it-all safety with his overall frame, his build. He's someone who I don't think he's going to be there at 42. I was contemplating there's a chance. I was contemplating putting him in my mock draft in the second round, but I ultimately chose to go with Josh Connerly Jr. since the Jets didn't take an offensive lineman in the first round. I think Amanwari is a really, really solid safety in a trade down. But again, like I was talking to you about off air, Michael, there are good prospects in this year's draft, but there's always the but after you talk about these prospects. So it's Nick Amanwari, great, but are you going to take a safety with your first round pick? There's always the but with every single prospect here. Would you be open to Amanwari?
Yeah, I mean, just like, we talked about the Steelers trade, the fact if it was Pittsburgh, you're not going to have an extra second round pick. So for the purpose of this draft, it's like you just moved back. So then it does kind of call into question, like, do you attack a non-premium position when you still have receiver, D tackle, right tackle type holes? So you would know more about him as an individual than I would. I haven't gotten into him yet, but from that perspective, it's an interesting question. But they still have long-term holes at safety. You have to think about your roster in 2 to 3 years just as much as today when you're talking about the draft. And at safety, they don't have any safeties beyond this year that are legitimate starting material, so they could justify it. But yeah, as your first draft pick after a big trade down with the new GM, definitely you would think about going to premium positions also.
1000%. Michael, we started with some J. Cole talk. We'll end with some J. Cole talk. Our guy, Highlight Haven, Matthew, comes in, my good friend from broadcasting camp, who is a big J. Cole fan, but he's a JID fan, which I don't get. Talk about a one-hit wonder at its finest. He comes in, he says, the offseason is J. Cole's best album, best overall rapping and flows. He's much more matured in that album. The Climb Back is the best song, without a doubt. Michael, thoughts?
Well, I don't really want to hear the JID slander. I mean, have you listened to the Forever Story album? That is
surround
that's a
sound.
classic
That's it.
in my mind. I think that whole album is fantastic. I'm just waiting for him to finally drop something else. But the off-season, I think it's between Forest Hills and off-season for me. I mean, it's very, like you said, very like matured kind of perspective. It's just so tight with the rhymes. The beats are incredible. That's the best. Like, you could definitely throw that on while you're working out, like that type of a vibe, which you can do with a lot of them. But I mean, that one, there's like no misses on that one. I don't think there is on Forest Hills either, but I could go either way. That's definitely a good pick. The only one there's only two that I don't think I would include in my conversation for number one, and that would probably be Sideline Story and KOD. Both great, like by J. Cole standards, like B+ /A- is just further down the list for me. So yeah.
Isn't there a new one coming out soon, or one that was
he's been teasing it for a while? It's supposed to be this year. I mean,
isn't that the one where Middle Child was vaulted from or something, from what I heard?
Yeah, it's supposed to be like leading up to the fall off is what he's
that's what it is.
But haven't gotten it yet, but I'm very much anticipating it.
1000%. I appreciate you all tuning in. Smash the like, hit subscribe. Can't thank you enough for spending some time with us here on this Friday evening. Back tomorrow, 5 p.m. EST. Cole Thompson, NFL draft analyst, joins us in the 9:30 tomorrow with Chris Grasso. But more coverage on this channel tonight. Jack and Josh take over for Next Gen Jets here at 9:30 p.m. So a little less than an hour away. I'll throw the link in the chat for you guys to go over and be there at 9:30. So that's when the show starts. We appreciate all your support as always. Michael, can't thank you enough for sparing some time with us here on the program. You got any final thoughts before we end the show?
Yeah, I'm excited for the draft. It's like about as unpredictable as it's been in a while. You got a new GM, new coach. I'm just excited to see that. This is always an interesting period here, and you got 3 or so weeks to kill between all the stuff that happens, and then now you just kind of sit there and process all that and allow your opinions to change 10 different times. So this is always a fun part. But it does let you sink your teeth into it and get a little more familiarized before the draft leads up. But yeah, thanks for having me again. I don't even know what my upcoming plans are. I kind of just like wake up and be like, what's the hot topic or what am I debating? Like tomorrow it's going to be Genty because that's kind of been brewing recently. So I don't know what to tease, but there will be articles. I can guarantee that. Also, so I'm glad to hear you have good taste with J. Cole and music, but
Yes.
television wise, have you watched Severance yet?
My dad is watching Severance right now, I think. I'm not a TV person, but is it good, Michael?
It's elite. It's peak television. Okay. Like I'm not a huge TV person either. I just tap in when I get a good recommendation, and Ben told me to watch this, and got straight through it up until the finale that came on I think last week or 2 weeks ago. Elite. Everyone should watch that. That's my shirt. I got my Mr. Milchick shirt.
Oh, there we go. I gotta check that out. We had we're having the Jet X family on. We had Stefan on yesterday. We had you on tonight, and we got Joe Blewett joining us next week. So we might have to get a Sabo and a Rivka appearance in there in between. We'll complete pretty much the whole team in just a week. I just go ahead. You're muted.
I just promoted a show on Apple TV Plus more than my own website. That's a really good outro.
Michael, we appreciate everyone. Thank you guys for watching. Can't thank you enough for spending some time with us. That'll do it for us. He's Michael. I'm Connor. And that's all. JETS, 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 Jets.